are without anesthesia in the mother's lap?
Yes. Less than 3 months up to maybe 4 months, whichever children come to me primarily, we do them without anesthesia in the OPD, and not necessarily in mother's lap, but
somebody is holding, they're lying on the table and you are sitting.
Yes, we put them on the table and my assistant helps me.
Okay.
And but as you rightly said, 6 months and above, they are very heavy, they are very active, they are very aggressive, and they won't tolerate casting. So most of the times what happens is that when I get a late presenting child, if I get somebody at 9 months who has undergone Ponseti and has been brace non-compliant, or virgin foot at 9 months who has not been treated, I'm not a very big fan of still doing Ponseti at that age.
Okay.
I call them back when they are in the walking age, about 11 months to 12 months, when they are now ready to stand and walk.
Okay.
And then I will do a limited soft tissue release and then cast because it's easier.
Okay. Ashok, tell us whenever we have to stop and then. I think he has started the relay, so we will have to start.
I don't think he is not talking. Ashok, are you there?
He's there.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just arranging the streaming.
Okay. Whenever you give the go ahead.
Yeah, just in 2-3 minutes.
Okay. By that time, we'll just continue some conversation.
So that is how I'm practically looking at it right now.
Same policy with Karal?
After the plaster.
Yeah, very much the same. Ashok, am I audible? I don't know.
We are
able to listen, Premal sir.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Echo hai tera lekin.
I'll request everybody, all students, to mute their mics. And if they want to ask any question, then they can unmute and ask.
Whenever a student wants to ask a question, he'll be raising the hand. Is that the sign?
Not really.
Not really.
Because there are too many of them.
Okay. So it would be at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
ये सैन फ्रांसिस्को का बीच क्या कर रहा है तेरे पीछे अशोक? वॉलपेपर है क्या?
Yeah, it's a wallpaper.
जबरदस्त है यार तू.
There is an option to you also.
Yeah, you also have.
Dr. Chandak, can I ask you one question?
Yes, sir. Please.
Sir, what is your strategy? So, suppose you get a child who is about a week old. For Ponseti plastering, do you give anesthesia all the time, or you just do it without, or there's some cutoff age beyond which you will give anesthesia?
So I start without anesthesia. If they allow, that's fine. But if a child is good enough for anesthesia, say at 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and he's kicking and is not allowing, then I'm required to give anesthesia, at least some sedation. But I don't know. That is the experience I wanted to know. Is that I am faltering on some points and I'm not picking up some points and I'm required to use anesthesia in an older child? That is what I wanted to ask.
So, sir, I agree completely with Sandeep that 6 months probably is a cut-off age, approximate. Of course, there's nothing black and white. Beyond that, the kids are quite chubby and kicking. So, I generally use sometimes pedicloral or Finargan syrup.
Okay.
And that really works well. But that has to be given at least 30 to 40 minutes before. It doesn't act immediately. So what we do is we generally give the pedicloral and then cut the plaster, let the child feed, and then go ahead with the plaster.
Okay. Another question I wanted to ask you was, once you remove a plaster on a particular day, same day you apply the next series, or you wait for a day, let it settle, and then put it?
Same day.
No, sir, it is done in single OPD visit.
Same visit.
If the patient comes, they don't remove plaster at home as a lot of people do it. Here we do it at our clinic. The plaster is cut, then the foot is washed. We apply some oil or cream and then immediately apply plaster.
So what I do is, Chandak sir, I ask them to remove the plaster in the morning that of the day that they are going to come come at home. So
how do you teach them to wet it and remove?
Yeah, wet it. So we have made a small video. My last fellow, Dr. Vivek Sodai, I think it is published. Ashok, has it gone online?
Yeah, it is gone online.
Yeah, so there is a video available on how to remove plaster post-Ponseti. So we asked the parents to see it, and we have described the method of removing plaster at home safely without causing harm to baby.
Can I get that video?
Yeah, it's available. Ashok, I think JOCR pe hai video technique.
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Okay, thank you.
So then they remove it, bathe the child, and they have to come in the afternoon during OPD hours.
Okay, because
my OPD is in the afternoon, 1 o'clock. So what we do is that ask them to remove in the morning. They take about 45 minutes to an hour. So child has an interval of plaster-free period of about not more than 4 hours.
What I find is on that day, if you reapply another plaster, they are very painful. So waiting for a day and then doing it next day, if it is feasible, patient from the same city,
should not do it.
Should not do it?
Should not do it. Most of the time, pain comes from the fact that if you have overstretched the collagen, there will be release of prostaglandin.
Okay.
If you will cause inflammation if you have overstretched. So that's the indication that you are using force.
More force. Okay.
Yeah. So a swelling or pain, it's generally because of tight plaster or overuse of force.
Okay. So that should not. Same day casting is recommended.
Yeah. So I think Sandeep.
Sometimes what I wanted to also highlight is that a premature baby, if you're giving casts, I have frequently seen that their neurological status also is disturbed and different. They have persistent neonatal reflexes, and they are quite cranky, and quite a bit of them have turned out CP later. So a neurology which is abnormal, I think, also predisposes to excessive crankiness and crying.
So, Sandeep, it's very well known that cerebral palsy patients in initial neonatal period have significant brain irritation. Exactly. And the classical presentation is excessive crying. And if you add anything which is traumatic like plastering, of course, it would exacerbate these things.
So you should be aware that sometimes these kids can be a little bothered.
Okay, so a strapping schedule initially and then casting would be better?
Pardon, sir?
Should we strap them in a corrected position? Is that fine?
No, because strapping forces it into eversion, sir. Any strap you put doesn't follow the Ponseti principle because it everts the foot. So we don't strap at all. At least I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, Sandeep. In this case, the skin is so thin that, while removing the strapping, you might, you peel up them. And what I generally do is I always wait for some time till the child gets weight and then apply plaster. That makes it life easy. And I've never seen it getting converted to surgery because they are quite fragile kids and quite pliable. So, they can be malleable. They are malleable, and you can do it at a later date when the weight is significant enough where we can handle easily. Parents can bring them easily.
So, Ashok, when do you want me to start?
Yeah, we can start now. Just a moment. Okay. I'll request everybody else to mute their audio and we can go ahead with it.
Okay. Shall I start? Ashok, can I go ahead? Okay, I guess.
Yeah, you can go ahead, sir.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. From Pune, this is Sandeep Patwardhan, pediatric orthopedic surgeon, and I am going to give a small lecture on clubfoot, especially with an orientation to postgraduate exams and concepts, right? And this comes to you courtesy iFix Foundation and OrthoTV. So we all know that clubfoot is a complex three-dimensional deformity with 4 basic components. There is an equinus at the ankle and at the subtalar joint. There is a varus at the subtalar joint. And then there is a complex deformity called supination, which is adductus with cavus, right? Both of them. And there is a spatial orientation, which is peculiar to clubfoot in such a way that the forefoot at the midfoot level is relatively pronated compared to the hindfoot. So in Ponseti, you need to supinate the forefoot before you actually start abducting. If you look at etiology, some surgeons, some examiners might ask you about etiology, which is why I put this slide up. In Indians, it's about 1.5 per 1,000. In South African blacks, it is about 3.5 per 1,000. And in Polynesians, that is Hungarians and Laplanders, it's about 6.8 per 1,000. More males than females, 40% are bilateral. And it is supposedly that it's a polygenic multifactorial inheritance. If you are asked about etiology, there are 6 well-established theories. One is chromosomal, second is embryonic, third is autogenic, fetal, neurogenic, and myogenic, which was published by Peretti. But the problem is that none of these theories have been proven to be completely correct. And there may be variations and there may be a lot of different factors which are coming into play. So every clubfoot may not be same and there may be a lot of various different etiologies. But if you read Ponseti's manual, which has become now like the Bible for all clubfoot treatment and concepts, what is relevant is that you can quote from this book. If the examiner asks, where did you read this? You can say from the Ponseti's textbook and it will be accepted. And what did Ponseti do? He studied the pathological anatomy of the clubfoot and he dissected several normal feet also. And he came to some conclusions. So what he said is that the genes which are responsible for clubfoot deformity are usually active and that starts in the 12th week of intrauterine life, 12th to 20th week. And the activity of these genes remains up to 5 years. Okay. Now, actually what this explains is that we see a lot of babies who say that we have done 1 ultrasound, 2nd ultrasound, 3rd ultrasound, and there is no clubfoot reported in the ultrasound. And when the baby is born, you get a clubfoot. So is it that all radiologists are bad and they are missing the diagnosis, or is there something else happening? So if you go to this theory of Ponseti, if you see the deformity is not during formation, it is developmental and it starts forming at the 3rd month of intrauterine life and may start forming up to 20th week, which is 5th month. And in our country, at least, we do not do ultrasound after 12 to 16 weeks. The anomaly scan, once it is over, the next ultrasound is done only at time of pregnancy. So a lot of babies with clubfoot you may miss because the clubfoot formation may start at the 20th week. And this activity of the gene, what it does, I will tell you later, can last up to 3 to 5 years, which is why again Ponseti said that after correction, your bracing must continue till about 4 to 6 years of age, right? Because recurrences are known till then. And what do these genes do actually? The genes create excessive collagen synthesis in the ligaments, tendons, and muscles, which cause the foot to go into supination and inversion. So they say that the ligaments and collagen tissue around the posteromedial corner, especially tibialis posterior, plantar ligaments, medial ligaments, all these suddenly start becoming aggressive and synthesize collagen in great large amounts. And that pulls the foot into this particular deformity. And then it is maintained there because of abnormal kinematics, which is what we try to undo when we do Ponseti cast, which again may be the reason that if you put a knife to this collagen when it is aggressive, there is a lot of fibrosis and stiffness which happens, right? So this is a etiological theory which can be quoted from Ponseti's textbook. Now, the eyes don't see what the mind does not know. So when you see a clubfoot child, always take a good history, detailed history into congenital defects of the locomotor system. Get a family history because 1 in 35, okay, in the second child, suppose you have a baby who has a clubfoot, the parents usually ask what is the chance that second child may have. So the incidence is 1 in 35 for the second child. Physical examination, the baby must be fully undressed, examine the patient supine, prone, and check for anomalies of the head, chest, neck, trunk, and spine and mobility. Always remember that clubfoot is a morphological deformity which is visually seen at birth, but the hidden anomaly is actually DDH. So more important, if you see a baby with clubfoot, first examine the hip, okay? Because you should not miss a DDH. When you look at the child, look for the morphological features, the facial features, the quality of skin. Look at the spine if there is any sign of spinal dysraphism. Look for torticollis because this can be associated, it's a packaging defect. And look whether there are any other anomalies in the other limbs, etc. Right? So this is a typical picture of a baby with a packaging defect, torticollis, clubfoot, metatarsus adductus, DDH. These all can be associated. So you should always be aware what are the other anomalies that can be associated with a clubfoot, right? So remember this. Always look for those extra skin folds. If you see those skin folds with the Galeazzi sign positive, you must do the Ortolani and Barlow or get an ultrasound done, right? Then you must feel. When you look, after that you always feel. In orthopedics, look, feel, move and measure. So when you feel, look for the mobility of the skin, how are the creases, what is the pliability of the foot, and examine the hip for a click, right? So these are examples where you have smooth and shiny skin here, no creases, a hyperextension of the knee that side with a vertical talus. This tells you that this is a syndromic child with arthrogryposis. You can see these knees which are flexed with absent creases. This is a popliteal pterygium with a clubfoot. And you have this child with torticollis. So all these features must be looked for in a child before you present a case. What about movements? You must move the foot and do the Pirani scoring. We'll come to the Pirani scoring later. Always do a telescopic test for the hip. Look for the neck movements. And finally, last 2 points are very, very important, right? Active toe movements. Okay, whenever you see a clubfoot, tickle the outer side of the foot and watch for extension of toes, right? If the toes extend, you are absolutely sure there is no congenital peroneal palsy and there is good power, and this child, you can prognosticate that he should be walking quite normally. Because a lot of times what happens is that you start Ponseti and after 3 plasters, you find that the toe movement is not there. And then you are worried whether it's an iatrogenic compartment syndrome which you cause and cause the peroneal palsy, or it is pre-existing. Always demonstrate it to the parents. Tickle the toes and show them, see, toes are moving, he's extending. And if they are not pointing to begin with, right? Also look at whether there is spasticity, because at birth, you can't make out whether the child has CP. And these last 2 points can bother you at walking age. When the child is ready to walk, your morphological correction is done and the parents are unhappy. When you measure, always measure the limb length and the limb girth. Okay, always you will find that the affected foot is less mobile and it is atrophic as compared to the opposite side. Why this is also important? Because what happens is that in unilateral club feet, always the leg is thinner and the foot might be smaller, but the total limb length is okay, but the foot size is different. So what happens is that the parents always will try to say that because of plasters, the leg has become small, right? So quantify it at time of first presentation and make sure that you are documented that this is already smaller and this is likely to remain the same, though functionally it will be normal, right? Look for bands like these. Now these bands are suggestive of Streeter's dysplasia, amniotic band syndrome. And you have these which can cause vascular obstruction and gangrenous changes, which might need earlier attention than the clubfoot. Sometimes you get macrodactyly, which is syndromic, like this in Proteus syndrome. Or sometimes you might be feeling that this is a clubfoot, but always look at limb length. Now, this was a case of divergent tibial hemimelia with a clubfoot, right? So they will always go into equinovarus. So make sure that X-rays are done only to rule out other congenital anomalies, right? What is the role of radiology in CTP? A lot of times your examiner will ask you, will you take an X-ray? And you should be able to justify if you are saying yes, why, and if you're saying no, why. So you must realize that the ossific centers of calcaneus, cuboid, talus, and metatarsal are seen in infancy. Okay, if an X-ray is to be done, it should be done AP with 30-degree crania tube placement, and lateral should be tried in maximum dorsiflexion with the foot parallel to the cassette. The navicular does not ossify till 3 years of age. So there is no point in looking at talonavicular subluxation or drawing axis. The AP view, people have drawn the kite's angle, the axis through the first and fifth metatarsals and the talocalcaneal angles. Normally it is said to be between 25 to 45, but in clubfoot it is down to 0. Okay, so this is an example of divergence in a normal foot and convergence in a clubfoot. So this is what happens. Even in the lateral, it's the same 25 to 45 with overlap of the calcaneus, which becomes parallel when you have a clubfoot. Okay, you also have this Bariolais angle, which quantifies midfoot adductus. These X-rays may be relevant if there is a relapse or in the older age when you are planning some kind of bony surgery. But otherwise, routinely an X-ray is not required to diagnose a clubfoot because it's a morphological deformity, right? What are the problems if you say X-rays at birth when you see the child first? One, ossification centers are small, eccentric, navicular is not ossified, and a two-dimensional fat image of a three-dimensional structure is seen on X-ray, so you cannot really draw axis. Okay, so all these angles which we talked about earlier are all erroneous because the nucleus of the bone may not be in the center and you cannot draw a line through it. So what is the role of radiology? Sometimes to assess the role of the subluxation of the talocalcaneonavicular joint, you may use it to guide your progress during cast treatment or assess the quality of reduction. And as I said, sometimes to preoperative plan in older children where surgery is needed and to quantify and assess results of surgery. Beware of X-rays because an abnormal talocalcaneal angle does not necessarily mean a poor result. If you have good clinical dorsiflexion and morphological correction is good, you don't try to achieve radiological correction. Okay, don't operate to get good X-rays because if you end up doing over releases and cause cartilage damage, you will end up with a very bad stiff foot. Okay, so Stark has demonstrated a 41% failure rate and 50% pain post capsulotomies for midfoot adductus because the X-rays didn't look good. Okay, so don't treat X-rays. What about classification? A lot of examiners may ask you whether this is rigid, semi-rigid, supple. What is this? Now, the problem with that is that there are no studies which agree on the choice of parameters, and reliability and reproducibility is always an issue. So the classification, how do you classify a condition where there is no universal agreement on etiopathogenesis, no universal agreement on results, no agreement on treatment, and there are multiple classifications, right? So you still need a classification so that you can quantify, and these terms like rigid, semi-rigid, recurrent, relapse are eliminated. You must have a common language of communication to plan a good management strategy. You must evaluate your results and for research. So which one can you quote now? Again, you can take a picture of this slide. This is Ponseti's book where he has classified clubfoot, and you can quote it from Ponseti's book. If your child is less than 2 years, you will call it an untreated clubfoot. When you give a diagnosis, you say this is a 6-month-old untreated clubfoot. If he has undergone Ponseti treatment and the foot gets corrected, it is called a treated clubfoot. Now, because of brace failure, tiband overactivity, or a recurrent tight TA, he gets a relapse, then it is called a recurrent clubfoot. Okay? If you do Ponseti and the foot does not correct, then you call it resistant clubfoot. A recurrent clubfoot undergoes Ponseti treatment again. If it gets treated, it goes back to treated clubfoot. If it is not corrected, you call it resistant clubfoot. If the treatment has been done with a non-Ponseti method, like surgery, etc., or the child is a syndromic child, right? So if there is a syndrome like arthrogryposis, spina bifida, Larson's with clubfoot, then you will directly call it a complex clubfoot. Okay? And if no treatment is done and child is over 2 years, then you will call it a neglected clubfoot. So these are the terminologies which can be used and can be quoted from Ponseti's textbook. If you look at clinical classification, there are 3 basic types for management. One is a postural or a positional clubfoot. second is a true club foot, and third is an acquired or a syndromic club foot, right? So a postural club foot is a packaging problem which is easily correctable, and there are normal creases. For example, this appears like a club foot, but it is passively fully correctable with normal supple skin and no dysplasia features. Okay, whereas a true idiopathic club foot is a germplasm defect with a dislocation of the TCN joint. And these are the features which we will highlight again later, but this is how it looks. Now this is, you can see a classical club foot with the deep furrows, the lateral malleolus prominent and the midfoot which is adducted severely with equinus. And in the profile, you will see how it is twisted around. So it's a rotational malalignment, right? Compared to the postural club foot, which is straightforward and simple. And the acquired club foot will always have an associated neuromuscular condition like meningomyelocele, spinal atrophy, CP-AMC, or syndromes like all these syndromes, which you must be able to quote at least one or two so that people know what you're talking about. This is an example of Streeter's dysplasia, which I already showed you, and a different approach, whistling faces, which you see in Freeman-Sheldon syndrome, which need a different approach. In our time, in the olden days, we were taught something called as modified Carroll criteria. This was pre-Ponseti, where he gave severity criteria and dysplasia criteria, which are now again, they are all there under a different name. Okay, but these were the criteria: atrophic calf, empty heel, fixed heel fixed to fibula, midfoot short first metatarsal, blanching of skin on pronation, and deep creases. So Ponseti's book also has determined the severity by looking at the size of the calf muscle, severity of equinus, rigidity of adduction, how much is it displaced, and depth of skin creases. There is this DiMeglio-Bensael classification. You should know the other classification, which has put clubfoot into 4 grades, 1, 2, 3, 4, of which 1 is the postural clubfoot, which is benign, which happens 20% of the time. 2 and 3 are the classical idiopathic clubfoot, and 4 is syndromic. Okay, so there is no separate classification, but 1, 2, 3, 4 all fall into the same descriptive types, and these are the frequencies. Now this is based on point system given to correctability of equinus in planes. Now you should need a goniometer to see whether the foot corrects from 90 degrees to 45 to 20 to 0 to -20. The problem is if you have a small baby, a neonate, and you want to put a goniometer on that and measure all these angles for varus, equinus, adductus, and the derotation, it becomes highly difficult to actually quantify it. So it did not become very popular because it is too tedious. It's good for research, but it's not practical in your OPD, right? So in the OPD, what do? You use the Pirani method, right? The Pirani is straightforward, more simpler, and more people use it. So you know the Pirani scoring has 2 components, hindfoot contracture score and the midfoot contracture score. So you have posterior crease, depth, empty heel, rigid equinus, and lateral curve, medial crease, and uncoverage of the talar head. So you can easily give a Pirani score to each child before you start treatment and then monitor the improvement over a period of time. So you can look up Ponseti's manual or textbook and you'll get all these point system where you have 0, 0.5 and 1 for various conditions, the heel pad, the equinus, the lateral border curve, the midfoot crease, so that you know how stiff is the foot and how much correctability you're going to get. A higher score means more severe deformity. When you start treatment, guidelines I can present to you for the aim of a functional, pain-free, normal-looking plantigrade foot with good mobility, no calluses, and requiring no modified shoes, right? So these are the 4 categories of treatment of clubfoot. First is serial manipulation and casting. Second is soft tissue releases. Third is bony procedures. And fourth is instrumented distraction. We'll come to each of these. This manipulation technique is now, what is now done is the Ponseti. But you must know a little bit about pre-Ponseti era. And what was popular was Kite's technique. So this was the concept of a 3-point pressure, like bending of a K-wire, where the fulcrum was the calcaneocuboid joint. So you grasp the forefoot, distract it, and try to open up, like you're opening something like a deformity correction with counter pressure on the calcaneocuboid joint. So what was happening is that the cuboid, the calcaneum was not allowed to rotate, right? The heel was everted as the foot was abducted and a plaster was given, and then gradually the equinus was corrected. So the problem was that the success rate by various authors in Kite's hand was 90%, but it was as low as 19% by Fripp and Shaw. So Ponseti studied that before he came up with this method, and he said the average number of casts required for his Kite's method was 20.4, which was quite a large number of casts. Okay. And there were complications of flat top tailors, growth arrest, failure to correct, and recurrence rates, which was as high as 56%. So there is the other method which you should know is the French method. So this is Ben Sahel, Professor Ben Sahel's method, where daily manipulations are done by a physiotherapist for about 2 months. They do peroneal stimulation and then they tape with adhesive tapes. And then they have a pediatric CPM. With that, they gradually stretch out the collagen tissue. 3 weekly sessions till 6 months, and then they wear braces and they do limited posterior release in about 30% patients. But what is the best method, gold standard, which is followed today is the Ponseti method. Now, this method has proven to be successful for in 78% of the cases with excellent results and has been shown to last for as long as 30 years. Okay, so it involves stretching the contractures and weekly cast application, and approximately 5 casts should be needed, no more than 10 casts, and you achieve serial correction. And then you follow it up with abduction braces in a particular way. If you do not use braces, then the recurrence rates go as high as 50%. Okay, modifications of the Dennis Brown splint, such as the Steenbeek or the Dobbs brace, are which used. So this is how the casts look, and that is the correction, and that is the lasting correction. Now, this paper is the landmark gold standard paper which made Ponseti method popular. Everybody should know this. This is published in JBJS, Cooper and Dietz 30-year follow-up note of clubfoot with controls. So excellent results in 62%, good in 16%, and poor in 22%, right? Which was comparable to the controls, which were normal patients sitting in the ophthalmopedy, right? So everybody should be able to quote this paper. Okay, what about surgery? Surgery is required when you need to do, when there is a relapse or recurrence post-casting, or you don't achieve correction in 3 to 4 months, or it's an acquired clubfoot, or it's a rigid clubfoot. Between 6 months to about 4 years, soft tissue procedures may be done. Between 4 and 8, you may need an additional bony procedure. And after 9, a bony procedure is always needed. Problems with surgery: extensive dissection may cause fibrosis, too much release may cause overcorrection, cartilage damage may cause growth arrest, short foot, and poor long-term results. Okay, the most popular paper or the technique used to be Turco's posteromedial release, which was published in 1971. Now, this was modified by Mackay in 1977, where he gave the concept of complete subtalar release. You can do the complete subtalar release by a single Cincinnati incision or Carroll's 2 incision technique, which is medial plantar and posterolateral. The goal of surgery is to release all soft tissue contractures, posterior tibial, Achilles tendon, talonavicular subtalar capsules, calcaneofibular ligament, the tendon sheaths which cross the subtalar joint, and the plantar fascia. So these are the muscle tendon, and these are the capsulo-ligamentous structures which are released. So you can go to the textbook and read them, but by far and large, remember that you lengthen the muscle tendon unit and you release the capsulo-ligamentous units. Okay, make sure you don't overcorrect. So examples where surgical releases have been done with 2 incision technique. Okay, and then you can give arthropronator shoes. When do you do tendon transfers? Okay, that is one more question which might be asked. Tendon transfers are done only if there is dynamic imbalance with a supple foot, which means if you have a foot which is not corrected first, you have to correct the foot and then a tendon transfer may be useful. You don't do tendon transfers in an uncorrected or a stiff foot. 30% of original Ponseti patients needed tendon transfers. The tibialis anterior is preferred. Other tendons may rarely be used. This is an example to demonstrate a tiband transfer. So you have a supple foot, and on walking, the child exhibits dynamic supination. So the tibialis anterior is overactive. And then you will transfer the whole tendon to the lateral side, to the third lateral cuneiform. And that is the change in direction, which causes the foot to move in a much better position. So a tiband transfer, please remember, only when the foot is corrected, supple, and there is dynamic supination in the swing phase of gait. Bony procedures, what are the bony? Excision of anterior calcaneal process or calcaneocuboid wedge resection. Hindfoot varus is corrected by calcaneal surgery such as lateral calcaneal shift or Dwyer's closing wedge osteotomies. And you may have to do sometimes a combined translational osteotomy, which I will show you, and a tibial torsional osteotomy if there is severe tibial intorsion. So if you have a residual or relapsed club foot, which is bean shaped with a deformity like this, you can do a cuboid closing wedge transtarsal osteotomy and translate the foot, right? So this is a combined double wedge osteotomy. You take a little wedge of the cuboid, cut across the tarsal bones and translate everything, and then fix it so that you change the shape of the foot. Okay, this is an example of a translational midfoot osteotomy to correct the foot. And if you have residual internal torsion, which is not corrected by 6 to 7 years of age, then you can do a tibial derotation osteotomy. For an example, you see this child with a tibial torsion, and that is post-surgery. So these are the bony procedures which can be done. If you have a supple foot with a calcaneal varus, a heel varus, then you do a calcaneal slide along with a midfoot osteotomy to get your foot aligned well. You do this especially in older children when the bone is well formed. Okay. If it's a stiff foot which has been multiply operated, then fixators are of use. Right. This is a Joshi's fixator which has been used for this multiply operated club foot, and that is the correction that we could achieve in 4 to 6 weeks, and that is the function at 1 year of age. So a very stiff adolescent relapsed club foot can be treated with distraction followed by triple arthrodesis. So fixator assisted correction followed by a triple fusion can give you a nice plantigrade foot, though it may be stiff. Obviously, you should know the complications of surgery, wound problems, overcorrection, AVN of Taylor's, recurrence, and scarring. Okay, you should not end up with feet which looks as ghastly as these post-surgery. Okay, this is really badly treated club foot. You should not over-lengthen the TA, causing calcaneus deformity, which causes weak push-off, and something like this, a pistol grip deformity of calcaneus, which is very difficult to treat. Differential distraction by Jess, Umex, or Elizarov may be tried in stiff feet, scarred feet to stretch out the collagen tissue like Ponseti using an instrument like the Jess fixator, and then you reduce retention and remodeling. So there is a method to do it. I won't go into details of how to do fixator unless we have the time. Principle is gradual distraction. You must know this word, differential distraction. So you gradually stretch the soft tissue. Elongation of soft tissue causes increase in the pliability, and then you manipulate it and hold it in the corrected position by squaring of the frame, right? Failed conservative treatment, recurrent after surgery, neuromuscular, syndromic feet, neglected feet. These are the indications. So examples where you have syndromic feet, where you do a Jess fixator correction, followed by plasters, neglected club feet, 11-year-old, distraction technique, correction achieved, and then maintained with braces, something like this. Again, arthrogryposis with relapse post-surgery. Again, you can do these corrections. So the outcome of all clubfoot patients, irrespective of success of a treatment, may be a atrophic and a small foot. Okay, please remember that, especially when it is unilateral, right? So unilateral feet always tell the parents that the foot might be smaller and shorter, but they have a functionally complete and productive life. Okay. So I'm going to stop this talk here right now and switch over to the Ponseti technique talk, if we have the time. Ashok?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, sir.
I can go ahead. So
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Right.
So you can stop sharing.
So what was this one? Yeah. Okay. Can you see?
Wait, we cannot. We see the earlier one.
No, I have changed it.
You have to come back to the Zoom panel, stop the sharing screen, and then reshare again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, come back to the Zoom panel. Okay. So shall I click on the new share?
Yeah.
आ गया?
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay, आ गया?
आ गया.
Can you see Ponseti's photo?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, so let me start. So this is Professor Ignacio Ponseti. Okay, you can read about him in his book, and a lot of stories are there about him. Sometimes examiner would like to ask you, how did he come to America? Which war was he a surgeon in, etc. So read history also because it's interesting. Now the Ponseti method for treating congenital clubfoot is an easy outpatient clinic treatment, which is effective in 78%. You get good to excellent result at a 30-year follow. Okay. No surgery or no other method has given these kind of results at a 30-year follow. It's highly efficient because you can get your correction in 2 to 3 months. It's economical because there is no surgery required, and it is supported by clinical imaging and long-term evidence, right? So this was the paper that I quoted earlier, the Cooper and Dietz paper, where it was a 30-year follow-up note. So what they did was they had 71 idiopathic feet in 45 infants, less than 4 months of age, who underwent Ponseti's treatment, and age at follow-up was 34 years. And then they compared those patients with normal people who were 34 years old sitting in ophthalmopedy for an eye checkup. Okay, and they had a questionnaire, they took x-rays, they did a physical exam, they did a pedobarograph and an electrogoniometry. And on that, they found that the Ponseti treated clubfoot, the control group had 63% excellent result, whereas Ponseti group had 62%, which was comparable. And good was 22% in normal people and 16% here. And poor was about 22% in Ponseti and 15% in normal people. So, which meant that Ponseti treated clubfoot did as well as normal people most of the times, right? So this was the best result produced by anybody in the world. So you are aware of these 4 deformities, cave, and you should know these pathological anatomy also. So when you start Ponseti treatment, if there is an examiner like me, the question I would like to ask you is that what is the principle of Ponseti technique? And the principle of Ponseti technique is called kinematic coupling. So you must know what is this word. What is kinematic coupling? Kinematic coupling means that the forefoot, because of its ligamentous connections to the hindfoot, carries the hindfoot with it without touching the hindfoot when the forefoot is manipulated on a fixed fulcrum of the talus, right? So if you do not obstruct the calcaneus, your thumb is on the talus, and you just abduct the forefoot, the hindfoot moves automatically. Okay. The component number 1, which has to be treated before you start abducting, is cavus. And cavus is because of first metatarsal drop or relative pronation of the forefoot as compared to the hindfoot. I will explain what this means. In a clubfoot, the entire foot is supinated, but the forefoot is less supinated. So you call it relatively pronated. So what you have to do is you have to elevate the first tray, line up the forefoot to the hindfoot. Now both forefoot and hindfoot are in the same amount of supination. And then with your thumb on the talus, when you abduct the forefoot, the hindfoot automatically abducts, dorsiflex, and everts. This happens because of the shape of the subtalar joint and the ligamentous connections between the forefoot and hindfoot. When you keep on doing this gradually and the collagen adapts with plasters, the only residual deformity left is ankle equinus, which can be corrected by a percutaneous TA tenotomy. Right? So this is the principle of kinematic coupling. After the full correction is achieved, you have to do long-term bracing to prevent relapses and recurrences till about 4 years of age. Right? Before you start your treatment, Pirani scoring needs to be done. Now, I already told you the scores, and these charts are available to you: 0, 0.5 and 1. Midfoot score, curved lateral border, medial crease, and tailor head coverage. And hindfoot score, posterior crease, rigid equinus, and empty heel side. Right? So you have this score in front of you, and then you will start your treatment. So I told you about the principles. So I'll just show you. So this is the Ponseti's original method. So just watch the video. This is Ponseti's own hand and thumb on the talus. So you abduct the forefoot. Yeah. So this is, he is demonstrating the kites method. If your thumb is on the cuboid or the calcaneocuboid, you are not allowing the heel to rotate. Right? So you supinate the forefoot and abduct with your thumb on the talus. So you can see from behind, when the forefoot is abducted, the calcaneus is moving on its own. Right? So this is what happens. So you should not block the calcaneum from moving. That is the principle. And this is a Siam image showing you the same thing. You can see how the talus and calcaneum start diverging just by abduction. Right? So that is the proof of the Ponseti method. So the maneuver starts first with identifying the superficial anatomy, the tip of the fibula, the head of the talus, 1 centimeter in front. Then with your thumb, your index finger, elevate the first tray, supinate the forefoot and abduct it. So again, tip of the fibula, 1 centimeter in front of it is the head of the talus, supinate the forefoot and then abduct. Right? Hold it for a couple of seconds and then let it go. Right? So gentle manipulation to stretch out the collagen. So that is the first step. The next thing that you do after you get that is put a very thin layer of cotton. Always remember that too much padding, like in adult orthopedics, you are not supposed to put too much padding here. So very thin layer of cotton. Some people use just a bandage without even a cotton roll. And then you should have small rolls of plaster pre-cut. With these, you start your casting. Use warm water preferably so that the setting time is faster. So gently finish the below knee part first. Never roll the plaster above knee in one go. Because if you bend the knee after that, there is folding of plaster in the popliteal fossa and causes blisters and wound problems. So always elevate the first tray. So you can see my thumb. Now with my index and middle finger, I am keeping the pressure on the shin. When you are doing your casting, your thumb should not be on the talar head. If you keep it on the talar head, you will cause blisters or skin necrosis over the talar head. So mold over the heel so that the plaster doesn't slip up. The thumb on my left hand is holding the supination of the forefoot as I'm pointing out. Right? And this is a single hand technique and my other hand is holding there. And I am molding the plaster gently so that there is no pressure anywhere and it's an even mold. Right? So finish the below knee part first, let it set, and then you finish the job by going above knee. Then you go above knee in smooth motion again. Make sure that you don't go too high so that there is no groin irritation. When you hold the knee while the plaster is setting, give about 15 degrees of external rotation. Again, take control of the hand, abduct and externally rotate at the knee also so that it helps in correction of torsion. Okay. And the plaster does not slip off. Ponseti method is always an above knee plaster. Some people ask whether you can do below knee. That is not recommended. You should always do an above knee plaster. And The last step is the T8 tenotomy. So in the earlier days, we used to do T8 tenotomy with an 11 blade. So once the foot is completely abducted and only equinus remains, so the midfoot score has to be 0. Never do a tenotomy before the midfoot score is 0. And then you can puncture and cut the tendon completely towards the skin. But this used to leave a big scar sometimes, and you need a lot of control. So I have now switched to doing it just with a needle. So I do a needle tenotomy, as my colleagues are aware, and with a small puncture of an 18 gauge needle, palpate the tight tendon, go in front of it, and using the bevel of that needle, like a knife, you can just puncture there and cut the tendon in one fluent go, as you can see here. And then that tendon is snapped. You feel that snap and you get your dorsiflexion. Yeah, you feel that jerk there, and then you remove the needle, and then you pull the heel down and get your dorsiflexion, hold a whole foot, stretch it out, and then you cast it. So that is the percutaneous tenotomy. So the cast look like this. The first cast looks actually exaggerated supination, then comes to neutral, then about 20-degree abduction, then goes to 40 to 50 abduction, and finally to 70 abduction with tenotomy, right? That is how it corrects. And finally the brace. So you must have the Steenbeek brace, okay, which has this bar. A lot of people will ask, can we not have braces without the bar? That is strictly not acceptable. A Dennis Brown modification where you have a low cut heel so that this is externally rotated about 70 degrees, maintains correction. The protocol is 3 months full-time bracing, 23 hours a day, and then nights and naps, 16 hours, afternoon 4 hours and about 12 hours at night till walking age, and nighttime bracing till about 4 years of age. Okay, the heel failure of the brace is the commonest cause of recurrence. Up to about 40% may recur. The foot abduction brace, the heel lock design is also very important. There should be no lift off. It's an expanded cup with a low posterior cut, as you can see here, and a peephole. And I'll demonstrate why it is low there. Look at this shoe. If you give an AFO, every time the child kicks, okay, this digs into the heel and causes the equinus to recur because the tendoachilles is getting irritated. Whereas a low cut heel, a shoe with a strap here and a low cut heel, even with ankle movement, keeps the heel bound to the brace. So that is why you have this. So this is how Ponseti method is done, and that is how it should be followed. So I think I will stop here, and then we'll wait for input from Premal, Taral, and questions if any. Is that okay, Ashok?
Yeah, that's okay, sir. So Taral sir is just joining in.
Hello.
So anybody wants to ask any question, they can unmute themselves and ask.
Hello.
Okay, Dr. Ali Asgar.
Sir, what is a typical club foot?
He is asking what is an atypical club foot.
Hello, Ashok.
Yeah, Sandeep sir. Okay, I think Sandeep sir is, yeah. Sandeep sir, what is an atypical club foot? That is the question. He can't hear us, I think.
See, basically, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, sir.
Yes. So basically, atypical clubfoot is one which is a little resistant to the treatment, where the foot is very small. It's quite chubby. There's a lot of fat. The first metatarsal is short, and the whole forefoot is in equinus. And it is a very high a very high equinus, meaning the foot is in significant equinus. So all these features put together, we call it an atypical clubfoot, and the method to treat this is slightly different than what we do it. In that, you don't do supination. what you do is you grab the entire forefoot from first and fifth metatarsal and then do the dorsiflexion at midfoot level first. Then you gradually go to Ponseti method and you will require tenotomy always.
Okay. There is another question by Dr. Yash. What is accelerated Ponseti casting method?
See, classically, Ponseti said that you should do it at 1 week interval. So if you shorten the interval to 4 days, you can still get away with the results, 4 to 5 days, and that's they call it accelerated. But I think in Indian clinical practice, it's not possible for our patients to come very regularly or very frequently as 4 to 5 days. So I think in my practice, it is generally between 7 to 10 days. I call the patient. Sometimes it's 2-3 days more if they are coming from far away. Say sometimes they come from 300-400 kilometers away. Then it may not be possible for them to come every week or 10 days or five days.
Yeah.
So I think that is a very flexible thing, and I don't think it has a great advantage.
I think you have logged out. I'm logged out over there. I'm open joined. There is another question that says, when do we change the cast after doing a soft tissue release procedure? Kemal sir.
So basically, I don't do any plaster change in most of the cases. Only in certain cases, what happens is you do a PMR, you apply a plaster, because what I generally do is I always put a talonavicular pin. So your external rotation is always secured with that pin, so that you don't need frequent plaster change. So I don't change that at all. In very few circumstances where tendo Achilles is very tight and there's a gross equinus where I do the posterior release and I don't get dorsiflexion enough, I change it at end of 3 weeks. So there'll be 2 plasters, and ultimately the plaster will come out at about 6 weeks interval. Always at 6 weeks.
Okay. Another question by Dr. Karthik. What is the cutoff age for soft tissue procedures?
That's quite so. See, if you once you are a little experienced, and what I have noticed is, I got about 6-7-year-old kids. You apply plaster, 2 to 3 plasters, below knee plasters pre-operatively, and they become frequently very supple. And those are the case you can still go ahead with posteromedial release with maybe lateral column shortening, as Sandeep showed, as a lateral close wedge cuboid osteotomy, and you can still get away with an excellent result. It's only those cases in which there is a multiple surgery done earlier that may not be amenable to soft tissue surgery. But when the child is really old, say about 8, 9, 10 years, the bony deformities are such that even if you correct, the child has high likely to get into what we call as arthrosis, subtalar arthrosis, and painful foot. In such case, ultimately they'll end up in triple fusion. So you have to consider that in AMA. So exact cutoff age is little difficult to quantify.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah.
I'm there now.
Okay. So there is another question by Dr. Gaurav. Is he here? Dr. Gaurav?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So is there any protocol for correction for the complex club foot? Any particular thing? Can it be started with Ponseti's method?
Hello.
Yeah, Patwalan sir, did you hear the question?
Yeah. So Gaurav, there is a separate protocol for complex club feet. Complex club feet usually have a midfoot plantar flexion of all 5 metatarsals. So you need to start with a modified Ponseti protocol where you have to gradually dorsiflex in the midfoot using both your thumb and both the hand thumbs, and gradually stretch out the plantar structures first. So there is a well-described complex clubfoot modified Ponseti protocol.
Okay. There is another question by Dr. Rohan. If we get a neglected club foot in an 8 or 9-year-old child, will we start with Ponseti casting or operate directly?
So the thing is that your question is relevant to the place where you are practicing and your experience, because what happens is that there are a lot of papers, especially from African countries and South America, and one from Delhi, who says that even at older age group, 5, 6, 7, 8, they will still treat with Ponseti. The thing is that at that age, the child is already in walking age. Second, the time required for a plaster is usually much higher. You need to give plaster for at least a month at a time, and multiple plasters, 15, 20 plasters may be needed. Okay. So it becomes impractical if your patient is going to come from a long distance and needs to keep on coming for plasters for long durations of time. So a one-time solution with a clean soft tissue release combined with bony or an external fixator, whatever you are comfortable with, can make him better in a shorter period of time if you have adequate experience. Ponseti, I'm not saying doesn't work. It may work, but it is simply not practicable.
Okay. There is a question by Dr. Varun Shetty. He asks whether while assessing the Pirani score, should we do it in a corrected position or assess in whatever position we see?
No. Pirani score is, see, there are some components of Pirani which have to be done dynamically. Tailor head coverage, you have to abduct and see how much coverage is there. Okay, so some parts are static, like the lateral border and medial crease, they are observational. But correctability of equinus, correctability and coverage of the tailor head, which is uncovered, are dynamic. So during dynamic examination, you have to move it and see. Otherwise, you will visually do it.
Right.
Okay. Can I add something here, Ashok?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Taral, go ahead. Hello.
Yeah. So I just want to clarify this confusion which Joy clarified for me and Sandeep many years back. So Pirani score was developed by Pirani sitting in a cafeteria when he was writing his thesis. And they just wanted a score for a clubfoot and a guideline for management. So it tells you as you are progressing with management how well you are correcting. It's not indicative of severity or correctability of clubfoot. So Joy explained to us very well that there is something known as severity of clubfoot, means how severe the clubfoot is. But there is something which is different, is correctability of clubfoot. So very severe clubfoot can be easily corrected. It may be pliable. But a less severe clubfoot may be rigid and may not be as easy to correct. So these are the two different points which were addressed by DiMaglio score. So if you do DiMaglio scoring, it tells you about correctability because it talks about soft and soft hard and hard soft corrections. So both are completely different things. And in my practice, I use Pirani as I do my Ponseti plasters, but we do DiMaglio scoring at beginning and end.
Yeah. So DiMaglio, as Taral said, is more detailed and is more scientific, but it is difficult to do.
And
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yeah. I think Taral sir is not is having problem with net.
No.
So let me take the next question. Question from Dr. Yash. What will be a treatment for neglected CTV with age 40 years? Should we go for triple fusion directly, or is there a way of
40?
Yeah, 40. Or should we do
why has he come at 40?
Sorry?
No, why has he come at 40?
See, Ashok, can I answer this?
Yeah, take the question.
Yeah, because
is he getting married again or what? Because I have seen that I got a family.
Why has he come?
So I got a family where the grandfather has untreated clubfoot. He is now 70. So when he had come to me, he was 60. The father was treated for medial release. He is about 45 now. And the child is about 12 years old who was treated with Ponseti. And I've seen that guy is functioning so well that the person who has been adapted for 40 years with a normal foot, I don't think you can make his life much better by addressing it and making it more painful, but plantigrade. So I think you will have to really honestly tell him that none of us have great experience on this. And what happens after this with a stiff foot? Will the life be better with the adaptation he has over this 40 years?
Right.
So the thing is, I have treated my oldest patient with untreated club foot, which I have operated upon is about 34, 35. Okay. And the reason they came was painful callosity on the outer aspect of the foot on walking. Pain was the criteria. And radiologically, the joints had already become deformed and arthritic. So at 40, I would assume that it is going to be the same situation. So you will need to correct it with triple arthrodesis. Now the question is, at 40, if you want acute correction, the amount of bone is quite high and you end up making the foot quite short or small when you do the fusion. So you can use Ilizarov or a fixator method to stretch out soft tissue or combine it with a soft tissue surgery first, or maybe Ponseti for some days to stretch out soft tissue so that the amount of bone wedges which are required to remove are reduced and you don't make the foot too small. So I showed you one case where we had done a fixator and then a triple arthrodesis. The triple will allow maintenance of correction and take away the pain.
Okay.
Yeah, I would do the same thing nowadays in neglected clubfoot in which are not in pediatric age group. So those who are above 18, we do soft tissue correction with JES first, or Ilizarov in still older population. And then when we remove the fixator, we add a fusion. If you don't fuse, then they will go back to part of the deformity.
Yeah, they relapse and pain remains. So you must take care of the pain also at that age.
Right. There is a question by Bansi. He's asking, are Dennis Brown leather shoes recommended?
Dennis Brown leather shoes means without the bar, or Dennis Brown splint he's talking about?
I think it is with...
See, when you are at Goa, you cannot do anything without a bar. Yeah.
Goa में nothing without a bar उसको बोल बंसी को.
So bar बंद हो गया ना इसलिए पूछ रहा है.
No, but yeah, so
no, if he's talking of tarsopronator shoes, CTV boots, after good correction, they are not indicated. But a Dennis Brown splint with the bar in between is mandatory.
Right.
So here, I just want to add, Ashok, that the orthotic treatment in children whom we treat from birth and those who we treat at, say, around 1.5, 2 years age is different. Okay. When you're treating from birth, patient will have Ponseti's management, plasters, and then tenotomy. And then we put on this foot abduction brace, typically, which is made by, propagated by Steenbeek. And then three months they will wear full time. And then after that, half time for almost 3 years. But if the child we are treating after walking age, we do a combination of splints. So in that child, suppose I treat a child at 1.5 years, start with Ponseti's and then do tenotomy and then get his foot straight, then I would use a foot abduction bar at night time, but in morning time, we use a hinge AFO. So that's the difference in the treatment between child where we start treatment before walking age and after walking age.
Okay. There is another question by Dr. Mahi. What is the role of talectomy in neglected clubfoot?
So in arthrogrypotic feet, when they are in the older age group, I have done talectomy in about 3 or 4 children who are 4 years and above, because the tissues are so stiff and deformity correction. The only way is to use an external fixator in those rigid situations. And if the child is non-tolerant to a fixator, or if he is from a rural background who stays far away and cannot come for manipulations of the distractors, which means because fixator requires a lot of attention, then a single step talectomy is a beautiful operation. It does very well.
Okay. So another question by Dr. Ali Asgar. Should we calculate score according to Pirani score or modified score while presenting the case in exam?
Pirani is simpler. Don't go into complications. Your examiners are not pediatric orthopedic surgeons. They won't know the modified score.
So the modified score exists only in the latest Campbell, which your examiners have never read.
Yeah, and that has also been discarded. So don't even talk of it.
Pirani
himself has denied it. Yeah. At Nagpur, we talked to him. He said, "Aisa kuch nahi."
Okay. There is another question by Dr. Prince Singh Waghela. Should we do tenotomy in local or short GA?
I do it without anesthesia. It's up to you how you do it. So depends on your expertise.
No. So it has been described to do without anesthesia because there are papers which show that even a short anesthesia can have a potential problem, and a procedure which can be safely done under local, you don't need to give a GA. There are some institutes where it is done under GA, but this is not how it was described by Ponseti or how it is supposed to be practiced. Okay. It can be very easily done. In fact, I will give if you allow me, just one small story. That there was a fellow who worked with Dr. Ponseti, and then I met him at one of the conferences. This was a long time back in 2004 or something. And I asked him, "Have you seen Dr. Ponseti doing a tenotomy?" He said, "I have not seen him, but I've often heard him doing tenotomy." So he must be in the other room and seeing the child cry. But he used to do in OPD, not even in a operating theater. It was an OPD procedure for him.
Okay. Premal sir, any other opinion?
No, I completely agree with Taral that it's very rare that we give anesthesia. Only the child is about more than a year old, where it's very difficult to hold the foot and do proper job percutaneously, because you need a steady foot. In only those conditions, general anesthesia will be required. But I agree with Taral that quite a few of our colleagues, the last plaster they give is under GA, and tenotomy is done under general anesthesia, which is absolutely little overkill from my perspective.
Okay. There is a question by Dr. Savitri. Are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm there, sir.
Please ask your question.
Sir, what is the difference between the Steenbeck foot abduction brace and the Dennis Brown splint, sir?
This Steenbeck foot abduction brace, which was designed by a orthopedician called Michael Steenbeck in the Uganda club foot project in Africa. First thing is what he manufactured a very low cost brace for them. Second is that he made the low cut, low counter heel. Third is that you have a metal foot plate which is fixed to the bar at about 70 degrees on the affected side and 40 degrees on the normal side. If it is bilateral, it should be 70 each. Okay,
sir. Yes,
and
sir.
the third is that the bar has to be bent at 15 degrees in the middle to achieve dorsiflexion. So all these components are not there in a Dennis Brown splint. It's a straight bar without any angulations or prefixed abduction.
Okay, sir. Yes.
So most important difference I'll tell you. The Dennis Brown splint is a product, very highly priced. Steenbeck can be manufactured in any part of the world without any license, and he got down the cost of the cut full brace to 10% of Dennis Brown splint. So what was available for say $800, they manufactured for almost $14 or $15. So he significantly brought down the cost of the brace, and that's how this treatment could be made available to several African countries. Secondly, if I have to use today, I would use it in preference to Dennis Brown splint because it has this beautiful malleable bar which you can bend to any degrees. You can't do it with Dennis.
Ashok?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Ashok?
Yes, sir.
I have to leave urgently for some work. Taral and Premal will handle the other questions. Is that okay?
Okay, sir. No problem.
As we take
I'll just log out.
Yeah. Thanks, Sandeep. I think we must clap and tell him a big thank you for doing a wonderful overview of clubfoot management.
Thank you, sir.
Stay safe wherever you're going.
Yeah, no, my wife is working. I have to pick her up because there is no transport allowed and it's raining.
Right.
Chalo, bye.
Okay.
Bye,
So
boss.
one more small announcement I want to make is on Monday at the same time, we'll have a talk by Premal on what after Ponseti. So we saw how to do Ponseti, but Premal will talk about life after Ponseti or clubfoot after Ponseti. What all problems can come up later on, and so please come back on Monday. We'll announce it and
Tomorrow.
let you know what
Yeah.
are the links. Yeah, the questions can come. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Yash wants to ask a question. Are you here? Dr. Yash. I think he has already asked his question. Okay. There is another question by Dr. Karthik. When to start Ponseti treatment? Immediately after birth or after when? After falling of umbilical cord?
See, I think Ashok, what is? I think it's a practical question, but only thing
Yeah.
is, we have been taught that if the breech delivery is there, we'll correct the foot first and then deliver the head. I think that is all very much ingrained in our mind. But I
Yeah.
think the correct strategy is there is in a study that if you do start correction in first 2 weeks of life, the number of the plasters remains same. So I
Okay.
think whenever you have a child born with clubfoot, there's a social issues in the family. They feel that child is not going to walk, etc. A lot of other myths are there. And if you apply plaster very early, there are sometimes psychological issues with mother. And
Right.
mother cannot come on day one to your clinic and they don't know what is happening. So my safe practice is to wait for about 5 to 7 days, and anytime between 7 to 15 days you start plastering so that the mother is also there, so you can explain all the nursing things which are very very important following applying the plaster. So I generally start between any time between 5 to 15 days, and I haven't had a great number of plasters. On the contrary, what Sandeep showed, that there is a 5 plaster course. Now that I am compiling my results of more than 1500 clubfoot treated over these years, we have realized that our plaster rate is somewhere around 3.2. So most of the kids respond within 3 plasters, including tenotomy.
Yeah, I agree with Premal. So one more practical point I want to just say is that most of us are called when the child is delivered, to that child has clubfoot and come and see and start the treatment. And it's very difficult and traumatic for the parents to start treatment very early. I think I would allow the mother and child to be discharged from the hospital, start them on manipulation, and we do first plaster at 1 week. By that time the parents have accepted it much better, and the family has accepted, and they are in much better frame to accept. By the time they have also done all their necessarily Google reading on Ponseti's management, and they are better prepared. But we do give them some reading material to read about clubfoot. Also tell them that children with clubfoot can do very well. We've had got some champions with clubfoot, children who have won running races, and my oldest clubfoot patient is now 18-year-old. So all those patients who are doing well, we tell them about, and when they come back, they are in much better frame of mind. So,
See, I agree with Aral that nowadays parents are very social media savvy. So we have a hospital page on which we have success stories of clubfoot patient with a 10-year follow-up. So once they have those visual images, they are pacified, and then there is no hurry for them to come and start plastering in 1 week or say immediately.
Right. So another question, Dr. Mahi wants to ask a question. Are you here? Dr. Mahi? I don't think so he's here. So another question by Dr. Surya. Up to what age can we successfully attempt Ponseti technique?
Yeah, Premal, you want to take, and then I can add up here.
See, I think Sandeep already said that, Ponseti can be done at any age, but whether it is practical to do it or not. Because what I feel is why somebody got neglected is because they don't have much time or they don't have resources. So in that circumstances, if the child is 5 years old and is going to have 15 plasters, it doesn't make sense. So my take is you apply 1 or 2 plasters, make the skin and soft tissue supple, and then you can do whatever type of surgery you want to do. For me, I think that 2 years or 2.5 years is approximately cutoff time where I would say that I'll be doing only classical Ponseti, where I'll be doing plastering and tenotomy, and child will be getting a good result. After 2.5 years, once the child starts walking, only Ponseti can be done theoretically, but is not a treatment of choice from my side.
Right.
So the more scientific answer also is that the foot become mature by 3 years age. That's why if you see a lot of procedures in children, as far as foot is concerned, are divided into those to be done before 3 years and after 3 years. So this is because the ossification of the cartilage takes place. The soft tissues become more hard to correct. So till 3 years, I would still put them in plasters, and till 1 year, most of them you can treat only with plasters and tenotomy. Between 1 to 2 years, in addition to plaster and TA tenotomy, some of them will also require a tip post, small opening tenotomy, tip post tenotomy. Between 2 to 3 years, many of them require additionally what is known as 5-point release, which is popularized by Dr. Dhiren Ganjwala. And he has identified 5 structures, which after 3 to 4 plasters you have to release. And these 5 structures are tendo Achilles, plantar fascia, flexor digitorum longus, and flexor hallucis longus. The 4th structure is abductor hallucis, and the 5th structure is tibialis posterior. So these 5 structures may have to be released. And after 3 years, even if you get partial correction with plasters, you may have to add a cuboid osteotomy. But this plaster treatment followed by whatever judicious soft tissue release is required actually, or a bony procedure, saves you from PMR. PMR is much more radical procedure, which we hardly ever do nowadays.
Okay. There was another question by Dr. Yash. Is there any method of doing TA tenotomy first and then go for Ponseti casting? Is it done? Is it correct? I mean, that is a question.
So there are 2 situations in which you will do it. One is a patient who has atypical clubfoot. So again, there was a question asked about atypical clubfoot, and there are different terminologies: atypical clubfoot, complex clubfoot, or resistant clubfoot, and people get confused as to what it is. Each one is. So atypical clubfoot is what you start with. Resistant, what you end up making it and then treat. So that's the difference between the 2 clubfoot. So in both of them, TA tenotomy may be required earlier. There is another set of patient where I have required TA tenotomy earlier, and those are plaster slippers, meaning you give a plaster and the plaster comes off. You give plaster again and again the plaster comes off because the equinus is almost at 180 degrees. So in those patients, you do TA tenotomy, reduce the amount of equinus, and then your plaster stays. These are 2 indications for doing TA tenotomy to start with.
Premal sir, any opinion on that?
So Ashok, that's what I was just saying, that one of my, when this TA tenotomy came, one of my senior teacher told me that TA tenotomy they used to do in 1970s. But the difference was the TA tenotomy, they used to do TA tenotomy first and then start plastering. And probably that is why the TA tenotomy did not become very famous and PMR came in. I think the correct sequence, as Taral said, that except in few circumstances, you would be doing all your Ponseti casting first and then doing tenotomy. Of course, plaster slippers are one of the conditions. Condition I would say is that when somebody has done a wrong casting and there is a midfoot break leading to rocker bottom type of foot, in those cases, I would add tenotomy earlier and then manipulate the foot.
Okay. There is a question by Dr. Mahi. It says that concept of calcaneopedal block and kinematic coupling, are they same or different?
Yeah, I think basically they are same. What it means is that if you stabilize the talus, the whole foot moves as a single piece. So when you correct the forefoot, the hind foot is automatically going to get corrected. So you don't need to specially correct it as it was shown in Kite's method earlier.
So I would put it this way, that the kinematic coupling is the cause and the block is the effect.
Okay. So I think I've taken most of the questions that were there. almost all the questions. If anybody has any more questions, we can take.
So I
Done?
just want to cover something which was not
Yeah.
covered. It is
Yeah.
a concept of collagen, basically.
Okay.
And the way why we start treatment early, the reason why each plaster is 5 days apart is based on collagen and stretchability of collagen. And that's why if you overstretch the collagen, there is going to be pain and swelling. And then that is stiffening up. And then that results in resistant clubfoot. So the whole idea nowadays, Ponseti told us that you should visualize the bones and put your finger at the right spot. One has to go beyond that and start visualizing the collagen fibers and make sure that you are stretching those collagen fibers by the right amount in the right direction. And then your results of clubfoot will completely change. It's a very gentle method and no pressure or force should be used. So the reason why some people get very good results of clubfoot after Ponseti's and other cannot replicate it, because if you're doing clubfoot plaster few patients every week, your fingers understand that collagen, and then that gives rise to gentleness and stretching of those individual fibers. So you go from anatomical bony level to a molecular level of treatment, and that is what I would like to now incorporate in a Ponseti course, to allow the students to feel that collagen. Unfortunately, it cannot be done online, but that's a concept everyone should try to get when they are doing Ponseti's plaster.
I
So I
think
think
Chandra,
Taral,
yeah.
just going along with the Taral's answer, I think
Mm-hmm.
if you read the Ponseti book carefully, what he says that you have to manipulate the foot for 5 minutes. So
Yes.
when you manipulate and you remember what is the maximum amount of external rotation or dorsiflexion you are getting, and in that position you apply plaster. You don't stretch when you are applying the plaster. So you stretch it first, relax the collagen, remember how much the collagen got relaxed, and in that position you apply a plaster, not vice versa.
So what they say is correction in Ponseti's method doesn't happen when you're manipulating. It happens in between manipulations, between the plasters. So if you have got to a particular position right now, the plaster will allow the springs to uncoil and make them ready for next set of manipulation. That's why you get more correction next time. So the correction happens within the plaster and not during your manipulation.
Okay.
That's the
I think
small
Chandra
part.
sir has few questions we can
Yeah,
take.
please, yeah.
Sir, please go ahead.
So one or two simple clinical queries. How do you avoid, do you tell parents to avoid the soilage of plaster? Any tips on that? Or they just tie a nappy?
Yeah, so what I do is practically, of course, you give uh, responsibility to the mother. Tell her that it's very important to keep the plaster white, super white, and not have any soilage. Now, there are some mothers, in spite of all instruction, they will not follow it. Or there are some children like meningomyelocele who have dribbling of urine and have no control. So one is, of course, disposable diaper. And secondly, in difficult patients, what I do is I take this plastic roll which we use in kitchen, cling film.
Mm-hmm.
The cling film, like how you also have that cling film with Surgiwear, but it becomes too expensive to be used for clubfoot and you don't need it sterile. So you take a cling film, the kitchen cling film, and we cut it into 2-inch rolls.
Okay.
With help of a scissor. And that cling film can be rolled over the edges. Generally, it has to be done 3 to 4 hours after you apply plaster because it needs to be dried completely.
Okay.
If you apply the cling film, then that is so plaster gets soiled, it can be easily wiped off.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
So, sir, I think that you're very right. Sometimes the kids are so small that the smallest diaper is also not fitting to them. And in those kids, sometimes the soiling of the plaster does happen. So you have to, however mother is careful, but if the child is small, this is bound to happen sometimes.
Yeah, right.
There are a few more questions. What is the reverse Ponseti sequence? So that is a question for
So reverse
Right.
Ponseti. Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
you can.
Yeah, you go ahead, sir.
So it's not done for clubfoot, it is done for congenital vertical talus. And here, instead of the whole sequence, instead of doing the correcting as a cave, you put it the other way around. So that's the reverse Ponseti. You get the foot into plantar flexion, you get the foot to adduct, and you get the foot to supinate. So all these things are done, and then the whole aim of this is to align uh, talus to the navicular bone. So that's done for congenital vertical talus and not for clubfoot. The only clubfoot treatment which you treat by reverse Ponseti is those who have iatrogenic rocker bottom. So again, you will reverse all the steps of Ponseti, get them into the deformity, and then do a T8 tenotomy. So that's reverse Ponseti. Premal, you have anything to add?
No, I think that's perfect. I think we can have one a presentation on CVT and then we can discuss. I think this is completely a different subject altogether.
So there is an interesting question by Dr. Mahi. Once you remove one plaster and you are going to apply the next one, what is the time interval you let the feet breathe for some time, or how is it? Yeah, Taral
I
sir, you
think
can
I
take
just
first.
said, I just said, I think it's always in my OPD, it's hardly about 15, 20 minutes because we remove the plaster, give the child to the mother, they clean the food, feed the baby, and I apply the plaster.
Okay, my practice is that I ask them to remove it at home, and then they send a photograph of its removal when they're leaving from home. And in Bombay, the closest you stay to the hospital, still it will take you 1.5 hours to reach the hospital. So I generally, there is a time gap of 2 hours. So what happens is patients remove the plaster at home, they give bath to the baby, do a little massage, they come to the hospital, and then we do the plaster. So there is a time gap of around 2 hours between the plaster removal and the next plaster done.
The same question in continuity. What is the time difference between two consecutive plasters? And how do we assess that? Is it standard or we can modulate it?
So the time difference, what Ponseti has described is 5 days, which is impractical because then I will have to do plaster first. If I do first plaster on Monday, the next will go on a Saturday and then Thursday. So it keeps on changing. So most of us do once a week plaster because you call on the same times, same day of the week, next time. Having said that, there are some patients who do come from outside town and they need what is known as accelerated protocol, where we do change plaster every 3rd day. And I found that that does not affect the number of plasters, but it decreases the duration. So that is the accelerated protocol, which is in selective children I do, not for everybody. Premal?
Okay.
I think we just discussed with you. I think you were offline. Mine is between 7 to 10 days, depending on how I am available and how easy for patients to come back.
Okay. So any period of maximum difference, meaning maximum days that you will not cross between two plasters?
Right now, yes. In days of Corona, I think it's going to be 3 weeks because of quarantine.
No, because what happens is that, the child grows and the plaster becomes very tight. So anything beyond 2 weeks is little, in very young child is different, and definitely more than 3 weeks. Sometimes after tenotomy, when the child comes, there is definitely a difference between 2 legs, and sometimes the plaster is tighter. So I think 3 weeks should be a cutoff line beyond which you should not keep the plaster in very young child.
Okay, I want to add here, Ashok, that I practice the principle of minimum plaster usage for Ponseti. So I just take 1 4-inch plaster, make it into 2 lengthwise 2 halves, and in that I finish the plaster. So it's not a very bulky plaster; it's very thin plaster, just 3 or 4 layers. It's not like a plaster which we give for fractures. The Ponseti plaster is different from those which are given for fracture, and that's why within a week's time it becomes little loose and it sort of it doesn't remain crisp. So you have to change it every week.
Okay.
You can't keep it for longer.
So I think that is all the question that we have. We had quite a few questions.
So Ashok, will this be recorded and available for people
Yeah,
to watch?
we'll record and put it online.
Excellent. I think we've had some excellent discussion, and thanks Dr. Chandak for being there, and all students who have been there and people who have been watching. So Monday, same time, I think
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Yeah, again we meet where Premal is going to talk about club food after Ponseti, right?
Right.
That was
I
wonderful.
think next,
discussion. We
yeah,
learned
next,
a lot actually. That was
so
good.
next time we'll keep the presentation short and question answers more, so that more and more people can try and finish within an hour. So you know,
Yes.
people can get back to their
Ashok, if
other
you
work.
allow, what I will also do is I have a presentation on my Ponseti.
Okay.
Everyone has their own versions of Ponseti. I'll record it and send to you. Can put it on Ortho TV, and then we can share the link that day for people who want to watch it. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you
Good night,
everybody for
everybody.
joining. We are closing this meeting now. Thanks.
Bye.